We've mentioned brigades a lot over the past few months of videos, with talk of light brigades, mechanized brigades, heavy brigades, and armored brigades. We thought it would be interesting for us to try and define each type of brigade and provide examples. We're also curious which types of units are best suited to defending the Baltics. But why discuss brigades and not, say, battalions or divisions? Well, the brigade unit size is particularly relevant to the militaries of the three Baltic nations as they form the core deployable active duty units of each country. Excluding reserve/training brigades, Estonia and Latvia each have one full active duty brigade, while Lithuania has two. So, for those who are completely new to the term brigade, what does it mean? Well, it's a military unit of a certain size. Unfortunately, there's no universally agreed upon size, and as such, brigade sizes vary widely in real life. Generally, however, a brigade can be anywhere between 3,000 and 5,000 soldiers. Belgium's Motorized Brigade is a notable outlier to this, as sources state that it is made up of some 7,500 soldiers. Brigades are made up of battalions, and a battalion is a military unit that is a few hundred up to about 1,000 soldiers. And so there are often anywhere between 3 and 5 battalions in a brigade. Before we go any further, it's important to remember that each country does things differently, and there are no hard rules about the composition of a brigade. But this video will go over some of the more common compositions and formations. So now that we have a general idea of size, we should say that there are all sorts of brigade types, ranging from military police and medical brigades to the operational sustainment brigade seen with forces like the US Army in the British Army. These types of specialized brigades are made possible due to a large number of troops, while smaller nations may only have battalions in similar roles. These brigades don't deploy as full brigades themselves, and would instead commit their subunits to combat brigades/combat brigade teams. Some brigades, such as Finland's Jaeger Brigade, are more focused on training rather than being a combat-capable deployable unit of its own. The Finnish unit specializes in Arctic training and ground-based air defense. With this video's focus being on combat brigades, there is more than enough to say on these types of units alone. Generally speaking, the combat brigade, sometimes assembled as a combat brigade team, is formed to include all the combat support and combat service support units necessary to sustain its operations. Based around armored or infantry battalions as the main fighting force, combat brigades typically include artillery subunits of their own. So, what are some of the general types of combat brigades? Well, one subset or category is the light brigade. As the name suggests, such units are meant to be agile and rapidly deployable. Deployment to the battlefield at its most basic form could use vehicles like the Unimog or even just marching without vehicular assistance. However, it could also mean insertion via air assets like the Chinook. As such, light infantry units, whether at the brigade level or higher or lower, are generally more useful in urban combat. For perhaps obvious reasons, light units are also better with forests and mountainous terrain. An airborne brigade could be considered an extension of this concept, being even more rapidly deployable. We'll discuss them a little more later in this video. Obviously, there are examples all around the world of such units. However, as it relates to the Baltics, we've seen the Netherlands' 13th Light Brigade deployed to Lithuania. One of the core platforms used by this unit is the 4x4 Fennec armored reconnaissance vehicle. Subunits of this brigade also utilize the Bushmaster infantry vehicle and the Mercedes-Benz G280 CDI. Perhaps somewhat countering the unit's lightness is the fact that the two infantry battalions of the 13th Light Brigade will be operating Boxer RCT-30s in the future, alongside other Boxer variants. The Boxer isn't exactly a light platform, and so it's a reminder that naming of brigades and their compositions is fluid. Interestingly, this Dutch brigade is under the command of Germany's 10th Panzer Division. Another non-Baltic unit that is connected to the region is the UK's 4th Light Brigade, which has been designated by the British government as being a reserve brigade ready on short notice to defend Estonia. The brigade describes itself as specializing in operating on foot in complex terrain where vehicles cannot go, like inner cities, jungles, Arctic and bushland terrains. One of the main platforms for the infantry battalions of this brigade is the Jackal Armoured Reconnaissance Vehicle. This light unit includes the 103rd Regiment Royal Artillery, which uses the air-deployable L118 105mm light gun meant to provide agile and rapid artillery offensive support. On the opposite end of the light brigade is the heavy brigade, or armoured brigade. Again, as the name suggests, these units are less agile but pack much more firepower and protection. For example, the UK's 12th Armoured Brigade combat team includes the Challenger 2 main battle tank as well as the Warrior IFV, Mastiff wheeled APC, Fuchs, Bulldog tracked APCs, and more recently, the Archer self-propelled howitzer. The Bundeswehr's 45 Armoured Brigade would be in this category as well. The unit, which will be permanently stationed in Lithuania, includes the 203 Tank Battalion, which uses the Leopard 2A7 main battle tank. And while the Netherlands' 43 Mechanized Brigade calls itself Mechanized, the fact that it includes the 414 Tank Battalion using Leopard 2A6 main battle tanks definitely makes it a heavy or armoured brigade. But on the topic of mechanized brigades, well, this type of unit is somewhere in the middle between light and armoured brigade. Such brigades typically have battalions using infantry fighting vehicles as their core firepower, but not tanks. This is where most of the Baltic militaries' brigades would fit for now. Estonia's 1st Infantry Brigade includes the Scouts Battalion and their CV-90s, but also wheeled armoured personnel carriers used by the other infantry battalions. Latvia's Mechanized Infantry Brigade uses the tracked CVRT infantry fighting vehicle, but is upgrading to the Ascod IFV. The unit also uses the Patria 6x6 armoured personnel carrier. Lithuania's primary fighting force is the Iron Wolf Mechanized Brigade, which uses the Boxer 8x8 infantry fighting vehicle with 30mm cannon as its main platform. The brigade will get heavier in the coming years with the integration of new Leopard 2A8 main battle tanks. As such, its King Mindaugas Hussar Battalion is planned to be reorganized as the King Mindaugas Tank Battalion. Lithuania's other active duty brigade is the Žemaitija Brigade, which most call a motorized brigade, although some sources identify it as a light brigade. The M113 armoured personnel carrier and JLTV 4x4 tactical vehicle comprise the main platforms of this unit. Again, larger militaries will be able to have more specialized combat brigade types, including airborne brigades and artillery brigades, and more. For example, the United States airborne brigades are all about rapid deployability, primarily from the air, taking the light brigade a step further. Their vehicles and equipment are meant to be air transportable, such as the M1301 Infantry Squad Vehicle or ISV. Russian airborne brigades would be using vehicles like the Russian BMD series of airborne infantry armored fighting vehicles. Artillery brigades are generally set up to provide fire support to other combat units and generally do not deploy on their own, as is seen with infantry brigades. But to wrap things up, since this is a Baltic-focused YouTube channel, what type of units are best suited to defending this part of the world? Light, mechanized, or even heavier? Well, all types are useful in their own way. Urban terrain and dense forest doesn't really allow for the free movement of armored or mechanized brigades, and so lighter units would be best suited for those environments. At the same time, cities in the Baltics are few and far between, and there are a lot of open fields and farmlands scattered across the region. Thus, defending these areas and various road networks while being rapidly mobile on the ground favors the infantry fighting vehicles of mechanized battalions within mechanized and armored brigades. In recent times, there has been a bit of a debate in Estonia about the UK's decision to commit the 4th Brigade Combat Team as a reserve unit rather than the UK's 12th Armoured Brigade, which was previously committed. On one hand, the 4th Brigade is all about rapid deployment, and so getting ready for the mission and moving from the UK to Estonia would be faster. But then critics argue that this unit is simply too light to hold up against Russia's armoured forces. The discussion was somewhat settled, with UK officials pledging that whatever capabilities are actually needed in the event of a crisis would be deployed, regardless of brigade. Generally, with defence being the core mission of any Baltic-based forces, it makes sense that armoured and mechanized infantry brigades would be the best suited, particularly when paired with strong anti-artillery, air defence and anti-drone assets. What types of units do you think are best suited to defending the Baltics, keeping in mind that there is some diversity of terrain for all three countries? Let us know what you think by leaving a comment.